What if everything you thought you knew about Marineford was wrong, and the one person meant to die actually survived? Imagine this. At the very moment fate was supposed to claim Port Gas D Ace, something inside him awakens, a terrifying power no one saw coming. Not just stronger flames, something far beyond it. But that power doesn't come without a cost, because in this version of the story, Ace lives and Luffy doesn't. The future Pirate King falls in his place, and with that single twist, the entire world of One Piece begins to unravel. The balance of power shifts, the meaning of justice changes, and the symbol of hope disappears. And at the center of it all stands Ace, no longer just Whitebeard's son, but something far more dangerous. Because surviving wasn't the miracle. What he becomes after is what should truly scare you. The war that shook the entire world was never supposed to go any differently. It all began when Ace, driven by pride and loyalty, chased down Blackbeard, only to be defeated and handed over to the Marines. That single loss triggered a chain reaction no one could stop. The world government saw an opportunity and announced a public execution, not just to eliminate a powerful pirate, but to send a message. Even the son of the Pirate King could not escape their justice, and that's when everything escalated. Whitebeard didn't hesitate. The moment he heard the news, he declared war on the Marines without a second thought. To him, Ace wasn't just a crewmate, he was family, and hurting one of his own meant facing the full force of the strongest man alive. As Marineford prepared for battle, the tension spread across the seas like wildfire. The Marines gathered everything they had, the Admirals, the warlords, thousands of soldiers, ready to face a Yonko head-on. Pirates, revolutionaries, and even civilians watched closely, knowing this clash would reshape the balance of the entire world. Even other emperors began to move in the shadows, waiting to see how things would unfold. It wasn't just a rescue mission anymore, it was a war that would decide the future of the seas. Everything was set, every piece was in place. The battle lines were drawn exactly as history intended, but what no one realized was that everything was about to change in one single moment. The battlefield had already descended into chaos, but nothing could prepare anyone for what happened next. Just as escape seemed possible, Akainu stepped forward, his magma burning hotter than ever, aiming straight for Ace with an attack meant to erase him completely. For a split second, everything slowed. Ace turned, too late to fully react, but someone else didn't hesitate. Luffy. Without thinking, without fear, he threw himself between Ace and certain death. The impact was instant, devastating. The magma tore straight through Luffy's chest, and for a brief, horrifying moment, the entire war went silent. Ace froze, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. Luffy, smiling, even as his body gave out right in front of him. The one person who fought through hell, broke into the world's most secure prison, and defied the entire navy, had just sacrificed everything for him. Ace's hands trembled as he caught his brother, but the warmth fading from Luffy's body felt colder than anything he'd ever known. The weight of it crushed him instantly. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how the story went. The guilt hit harder than any attack. His pride, his choices, everything led to this moment. The battlefield noise came rushing back, but to Ace, it felt distant, drowned beneath a storm of rage and grief tearing him apart from the inside. His breathing grew heavier, his body shaking uncontrollably as something dark and overwhelming began to rise, and in that exact moment, something inside Ace finally snapped. The moment Ace broke, the battlefield felt it. His flames didn't just flare up, they transformed. What was once a familiar orange blaze shifted into something far more intense, a piercing blue fire that burned with an unnatural glow. The air itself began to distort around him, crackling as if reality couldn't handle the heat he was generating. This wasn't just fire anymore. It was something closer to plasma, a state of power no one had ever seen from the Mera Mera no Mi. The ground beneath his feet scorched instantly, melting and warping as Ace stood there trembling with rage. Then he moved, and no one could keep up. In a flash he vanished, reappearing across the battlefield with a speed that rivaled even the fastest fighters present. Marines were blown away before they could react, and even the strongest pirates hesitated, unsure of what they were witnessing. When Blackbeard tried to step in, confident in his ability to nullify devil fruits, he quickly realized this wasn't the same Ace he had defeated before. The blue flames slammed into him before he could fully react, sending him crashing back with a force that shattered his composure. For the first time, Blackbeard hesitated, then retreated, a complete reversal of fate. The war itself seemed to bend around Ace's fury, as if he had become something beyond control. But while everyone focused on the overwhelming power he displayed, no one realized the truth. This wasn't a blessing. It was burning through him from the inside, and this kind of power always comes at a terrifying cost. At first, it looked like Ace had become unstoppable, but that illusion didn't last. The blue flames raging around him weren't just destroying the battlefield, they were consuming him. Every second he stayed in that state, his body burned hotter, his breaths grew heavier, and the air around him screamed under the pressure. This wasn't just power, it was his life force being turned into fuel. But Ace didn't care. Not anymore. The grief, the guilt, the image of Luffy collapsing in his arms, it all twisted into something uncontrollable. He stopped seeing allies and enemies. Anyone who moved, anyone who got close, became a target. His attacks tore through Marineford without discrimination, turning sections of the battlefield into molten ruin. Even the White Whitebeard pirates struggled to approach him, their own commander now a force of destruction they couldn't reach. Panic spread fast. If this continued, there wouldn't be anything left to save. And then, everything changed again. A sudden wave of overwhelming presence cut through the chaos, halting the war itself. Shanks had arrived. Without hesitation, he stepped directly into Ace's path, meeting those burning blue flames head-on. Their clash sent shockwaves across the battlefield, but Shanks didn't attack. He held him there, forcing Ace to confront something beyond his rage. Others joined in, trying to restrain him as the flames began to flicker, weaken, and finally fade. Ace collapsed, his body giving out after pushing far beyond its limit. The war came to a sudden stop soon after, but the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was something heavier, because even though the fighting had ended, the damage left behind could never be undone. The aftermath of Marineford didn't feel like a victory for anyone. It felt like the end of something far bigger. The news spread across the world in waves that no one could ignore. Whitebeard, the strongest man alive, had fallen, and Luffy, the rising pirate who defied the entire world, who broke into Impel Down and shook the Navy itself, was gone too. Two names that were meant to shape the future of the seas were erased in a single war, and in the middle of it all, Ace survived. But survival didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a punishment he couldn't escape. Every breath he took reminded him of what it cost. Luffy's smile, Whitebeard's final stand, the sacrifices made just to keep him alive. It all weighed on him like chains he couldn't break. The guilt didn't fade. It grew sharper with every passing day. Even Garp, the man known as the hero of the Marines, couldn't withstand the collapse of his own family. The weight of losing Luffy broke something inside him, forcing him into a quiet retirement, stepping away from the world he once protected. Meanwhile, the balance of power across the seas began to crack faster than anyone expected. With Whitebeard gone, the Yonko system destabilized. With Luffy gone, the spark of a new generation vanished. The world didn't feel controlled anymore. It felt like it was slipping toward chaos. Pirates grew bolder, the Marines grew harsher, and fear spread everywhere. And in the center of it all stood Ace, carrying the burden of two lost futures. But what he decided next would shock the entire world. After Marineford, Ace didn't stay to celebrate survival or mourn in public. He simply vanished. No announcement, no farewell, no trace of where he went. The Whitebeard pirates tried to find him, but it was like he had erased himself from the sea entirely. The weight of everything he had lost, Luffy, Whitebeard, and the countless lives caught in the war, became something he refused to carry in front of others. Instead, he chose isolation. Deep in an uninhabited stretch of the Grand Line, Ace began training alone, cutting ties with everything that reminded him of the past. At first, it wasn't about strength. It was about control. The blue flames inside him were still unstable, still dangerous, still tied to emotion. Every time he lost focus, they threatened to consume him again. But over time, something changed. Pain turned into discipline. Rage turned into precision. And slowly, he began to master what no one thought possible. The awakened form of his flame, refined into something far more stable and deadly. Alongside it, his Haki grew stronger, sharper, more instinctive, as if his grief itself was fueling his evolution. By the end of 2 years, Ace was no longer the reckless pirate who once chased pride into defeat. He had become something else entirely, colder, calmer, and far more dangerous than before. Even the sea itself seemed quieter around him, as if sensing the change. But while Ace disappeared from the world to rebuild himself, the rest of the world didn't stop moving forward, especially the Straw Hats, who were now forced to face a very different future. The news hit the Straw Hats like a storm they couldn't escape. Luffy was gone. Not missing, not defeated, gone. The world called it the end of a rising pirate, but to them, it felt like something much worse. It felt like the heart of their crew had been ripped out in the middle of a journey that was never finished. For a while, everything fell into silence. Nami stopped arguing over directions. Usopp stopped joking. Even Sanji's usual energy faded into something heavier. Each of them was processing the same truth in their own way, but none of it made it easier to accept. And yet, even in that emptiness, something began to shift. Zoro was the first to stand back up, not as a captain, not as a replacement, but as the one who refused to let everything fall apart. He carried Luffy's will without saying it out loud, guiding the crew forward through sheer presence and resolve. There was no leader now, but there was direction. Slowly, the Straw Hats stopped standing still and started moving again. Training became their way of coping. Every member pushed themselves harder than ever before, not just to grow stronger, but to make sure Luffy's dream didn't fade with him. The journey they once followed with laughter and trust had turned into something sharper, more determined, and far more serious. But even with all their effort, one question lingered in the background. What comes next for a crew that has lost its captain? And the answer would arrive sooner than they expected, when they finally met someone they never thought they'd see again. Sabaody felt different at the day he arrived. The air was tense, almost heavy, as if the island itself recognized that something important was about to change. The Straw Hats had gathered there after 2 long years of training, each one stronger, sharper, and more serious than before. But nothing could prepare them for what they saw next. A figure stepped into view, walking calmly through the crowd, his presence quiet but unmistakably powerful, and on his head was Luffy's straw hat. For a moment, everything froze. Nami's breath caught. Usopp's voice failed him. Even Zoro's eyes narrowed, not in aggression, but in recognition of something deeper. Ace had returned. consumed. But he wasn't the same man who once burned through Marineford in chaos and grief. The fire around him was controlled now, contained, like something carefully mastered rather than violently unleashed. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he simply stood there, carrying the weight of everything that had been lost. When he finally spoke, his words weren't about replacing Luffy. He made that clear from the start. He wasn't here to take Luffy's place. He was here to protect what Luffy left behind. The Straw Hats listened in silence as Ace explained what he had become. Not just a survivor of Marineford, but the keeper of Luffy's dream. A dream that couldn't be allowed to die. One by one, they accepted it. Not as a transfer of leadership, but as an extension of will. The crew had found a new path forward, but it wasn't built on replacement. It was built on a continuation. However, beneath Ace's calm exterior, something darker still burned. Because he wasn't just chasing the future, he was still chasing revenge. Dressrosa became the stage for something far bigger than anyone expected. What was supposed to be a chaotic tournament for power quickly turned into a battlefield of fate. The prize at the center of it all was the Gura Gura no Mi, the devil fruit once wielded by Whitebeard, the man who shook the world. Pirates from across the seas gathered, each one hungry for a chance at unimaginable strength. But no one was prepared for what happened when Blackbeard arrived. The atmosphere shifted instantly. His presence alone was enough to silence parts of the crowd, his confidence as sharp as ever. He had come for one reason, to complete what he failed to take at Marineford. But standing in his way was someone he never expected to see again. Ace. The moment their eyes met, the air cracked with tension. Blackbeard mocked him, reminding him of the past, of Marineford, of Luffy's death, trying to break him the same way he once did. But this time, it didn't work. Ace didn't react with chaos. He reacted with control. His blue flames flared, not wildly, but with precision, shaped and refined like a weapon rather than a disaster. When the fight erupted, it was nothing like before. Ace moved with terrifying efficiency, overpowering Blackbeard in ways no one thought possible. Even the Yami Yami no Mi couldn't fully suppress him. Blow after blow forced Blackbeard backward, each attack heavier than the last. For the first time, the Dark Pirate was on the defensive. Injured, outmatched, and unable to regain control, Blackbeard was forced to retreat, escaping before he could suffer a fatal defeat. And in that moment, the balance of power across the seas shifted completely. The world didn't take long to realize what had happened after Dressrosa. The defeat of Blackbeard wasn't just another battle lost, it was a turning point in the balance of power across the seas. And at the center of it all stood Ace. No longer just the son of the Pirate King or the survivor of Marineford, he had become something far greater in the eyes of the world. News spread fast. A new Yonko had risen, and he wasn't waiting for recognition. He had earned it through sheer dominance. Ace's controlled awakening, combined with his mastery of Haki, placed him on a level few could challenge head-on. The seas trembled at the thought of what he had become. Meanwhile, the Straw Hats, now fighting alongside him, were no longer seen as a rookie crew. Their combined strength, sharpened by years of loss and training, pushed them into a tier no one expected them to reach so quickly. They weren't just surviving the new world anymore, they were shaping it. Even the giants of the sea began to feel the pressure. Big Mom tightened her control over her territories, sensing instability. Kaido grew more aggressive, viewing Ace's rise as a direct challenge to his dominance. The Yonko system, once stable and untouchable, now felt fragile, like it was on the edge of collapse. Wars were no longer distant possibilities. They were becoming inevitable. Every faction was watching, waiting for the moment everything would explode. Because the rise of Ace didn't just change the balance of power, it disrupted the future itself. And while the world focused on the new Yonko, something far more dangerous was already moving in the shadows, something no one had noticed yet. For a long time, the world thought Luffy's devil fruit was just another rare power lost to history. But that illusion didn't last. Whispers began spreading from the highest levels of the world government. Something had resurfaced, something tied not just to strength, but to legend itself. The fruit Luffy once carried, the one that was thought to be ordinary, had revealed its true nature. It wasn't the Gum Gum fruit at all. It was something far more dangerous, something connected to Joy Boy, and the ancient figure known as Nika, a symbol of freedom that the world government had spent centuries trying to erase. Panic spread through the Marines as the truth surfaced. This wasn't just a devil fruit anymore, it was a threat to their entire system of control. Suddenly, the island where it was being held became one of the most heavily guarded locations in the world. Admirals were deployed. Cypher Pole agents filled the shadows. Even the smallest possibility of its awakening was treated like a global emergency, because they knew what it meant. If someone inherited that power again, the balance of the world could collapse completely. And at the center of this storm stood Ace, watching everything unfold from a distance. The same fruit that once belonged to his brother now sat at the heart of a global crisis. Memories of Luffy resurfaced, but so did something else. Resolve. A decision forming in silence, heavier than any battle he had ever fought. Because Ace understood one thing clearly now. This wasn't just about power, or revenge, or survival anymore. It was about the future itself, and what he chose next would push him further than anyone expected, into his most dangerous move yet. Egghead became the point where everything finally collided. What was supposed to be a controlled retrieval mission quickly spiraled spiraled into chaos the moment the world government moved in full force. Admiral Kizaru arrived first, light tearing through the skies as he descended with overwhelming speed, followed by something far more terrifying. Saint Saturn, one of the 5 elders, stepping onto the battlefield in his true form. The pressure alone was enough to silence the island. For the first time in years, even Ace felt the weight of what they were facing. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was an execution attempt on an entire generation. The stakes had reached a level the world had never seen before. With Luffy gone, there was no Joy Boy awakening waiting in the shadows, no destined savior to tip the balance. That absence changed everything. The world government wasn't holding back anymore. They were enforcing absolute control. Ace stood at the center of it all, his blue flames flickering against the overwhelming presence of an admiral and an elder at the same time. Zoro fought relentlessly beside him, clashing with Kizaru in a duel of speed and raw force, but even their combined strength couldn't erase the difference in authority standing before them. The battlefield felt heavier, darker, as if hope itself had been stripped away. Every attack, every movement carried a sense of desperation instead of triumph. Because this wasn't the world preparing for a new dawn, it was the world tightening its grip before something broke completely. And in the middle of it all, Ace realized something terrifying. The future wasn't moving toward freedom anymore, it was moving toward control, and there was no Luffy left to stop it. In the end, nothing about this timeline feels simple anymore. Ace survived Marineford, but survival didn't bring peace. It reshaped him into something entirely different. Stronger, smarter, and far more ruthless than the man he once was, he no longer fights with the reckless emotion that defined his past. Every move he makes is calculated, every flame controlled, every decision weighed against a world that now trembles at his name. Because this isn't the Ace who once inspired loyalty through warmth and brotherhood, this is someone the world fears. And that fear changes everything. Without Luffy's presence, without his unshakable spirit and belief in freedom, something essential is missing from the seas. Hope no longer spreads through words or dreams. It's replaced by raw power, dominance, and survival. Even the Straw Hats, though stronger than ever, move forward in a world that feels colder, heavier, and far less forgiving. The question lingers like a shadow over everything that has changed. Did Ace surviving Marineford actually save the world from collapse? Or did it quietly create something far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined?